Hey friends, welcome to another episode of the 10 Laws podcast with East Forest. I'm East Forest. Nice to have you here. Today I have a conversation with HeatherAsh Amara, who wrote a book called Warrior Heart Practice, and she has done a lot of work in the Toltec traditions, which I'm a bit familiar with my partner Radha, who's done a lot of work down there. And so I thought it could be really interesting. I'm always interested in hearing other perspectives about how we can walk through these times with as much grace as we can muster. And so we had a good conversation about that, and I'm sure that you will enjoy it. Hey, thanks for the folks who've given this podcast a review. It means a lot. It helps us get new guests, and you can do it while I'm talking. Give a little shout out to Kelly, who on the iTunes podcast review said, 5 stars, love the variety of topics and guests, grounded and profound conversations. Thank you. Well, you're welcome, Kelly. Thank you for providing a review. I just got back from Boulder, Utah. I was down there with the pup, Kaya. Kaya's my first dog that I got 11 years ago, about. And she's like my OG guru. And she provides the ultimate mirror for myself, as well as lots of pretty intense dog farts as we're in the studio. Man, those could clear a room. But it's always good to get time with her and sort of get me back to the basics of like taking care of an animal, because it reminds me that I'm an animal and I have the same animal needs, like structure and being fed well and exercise and love, oxytocin. So it helps me kind of remember that about myself. And I've been thinking about doing a playlist that's for our four-legged friends, because over the years I've learned like what music my dog really liked. And I picked up a few things. There's been a few small studies about that, but I noticed like what relaxed Kaya the most. And so I thought it'd be fun to put out kind of a playlist that it's a bit tongue-in-cheek, that it's like, this is music for dogs, but hey, it's music for animals and it works for us too. So, and it's kind of a way of paying it back to man's best friend, man and woman's best friend. Just something I thought I might play around with just for fun. But I've been totally busy working on this new full-length album and mixing the strings, and boy, it was complicated, but it's actually going really well, and it's been fun. And I'll find a way to maybe give you some glimpses into that process as we get this record finished up. But in the meantime, there's going to be a Ram Dass Instrumentals album being released on September 18th on all digital platforms. So hopefully you'll enjoy that. It's a way to really honor all the people and the session musicians who worked on that record, who are just incredible. So that's coming out soon. And otherwise, it's just been walking through this COVIDian time as we're stepping into the fall, into September now. I had this realization that I was thinking about what creates effective change in our lives. And typically, what's known in the world of psychology, that it's like bankruptcy, divorce, and near-death experiences is also on that list. Like, it takes these kind of big things for us typically as humans to really step into real change. And we are going through kind of literally a near-death experience with the pandemic. Whatever it sort of means to you, I think most of us on some level that's come up in our consciousness. I know for me, I dream about it a lot. So I know it's there in the background, where you've had to think about mortality. Maybe you've gone through it. Maybe you know someone who has in a really acute way. Or it's just like in the news a lot and in our conversations a lot. I mean, essentially this is all like about death. And so we're going through this kind of near-death experience. And I bring it up because perhaps the good news of that is that it really is like something that cuts deep, and it is an opportunity for actual real motivation and change, both for us on individual levels, but collectively, as a world, as a society. I know a lot of us are thinking about like, well, is this really going to make the kind of change we want to see? Or is it just like eventually someday we're just going to go back to normal, quote unquote normal, and just continue to produce plastic and pollute and destroy and just all the same things? And in some ways, there'll be a bit of both. But what I mean to say is that change will continue to happen and the world will continue to evolve in its messy, beautiful way. But I do feel that what we're walking through is a fire next to the face of death that is real and that's powerful and will continue. And we're going to continue to walk through that fire. I remember a tradition, I can't remember in what culture it was, of sort of like carrying a death shroud and wearing it with you every day as a way to remind you of your mortality and death, as a mechanism to feel more alive, as a way of reminding ourselves that we are mortal, that we are corporal beings, and that we can be more alive by facing death. So naturally that comes with a lot of stress, and that comes with sort of these opposing polarities of fear and all the reactions that come on the base level from that we're also seeing too. But just wanted to honor and mark this happening because there's a doorway there. And we get into that a bit in this conversation. So that's just what's kind of on my mind. But we're going to keep walking our walk, friends. So thanks for listening, and let's dive into this conversation with HeatherAsh Amara. All right. Believe it or not, that's a pretty tame process. I've had some pretty gnarly podcast technical things at the beginning.
Bet.
Anything from like simple things like why won't this plug into a thing? And I'm just like, I can't help you there, but
call your kid.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for taking the time. One thing that stuck out to me when I was looking at your work is that the Toltec, my partner has a connection to that work as well. She's been taking some groups down for many years to Teotihuacan and doing retreats down there. And so it's interesting to me. And the thing that comes up for me first, and I think if you don't mind, we'll just kind of dive in and we'll kind of work around and find our way to this, is how that old ancient vision of reality and a walking through life applies to today, but particularly what we're going through today, which feels like a tremendous transition, a tremendous sense of loss, if anything. And I think we could just start on that as a riffing point of the Toltec's vision from long ago to this current situation.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so relevant in that the Toltec were a group of people that came together in South and Central Mexico to study perception. And they were really curious about how we are all dreaming. So not just at night, but during the day. And the path of really learning to witness your thoughts separate from your emotions, separate from what's actually happening is especially vital today. Because the dream that we're all in has shifted drastically in a way that was unexpected for almost all of us, probably except for the pandemic people and scientists who are like, yeah, we knew this was coming. And so it's given us all the opportunity to step back and really ask ourselves, how are we relating to the world in a way that's serving us, supporting us, nourishing us? And where are we holding stories and beliefs and agreements that are keeping us stuck in our head in how we think the world should be, rather than in relationship, creative relationship, as I see it, with how the world is now?
Well, if you're holding on to stories of how things should be, or if essentially you're not getting on board with the change of what is, I would imagine part of that shift internally has to do with a grieving process. I mean, this just to have a good conversation, I'll push back and say, sometimes it's hard to just make a choice. Sometimes I hear this modality of thinking, I'm like, well, it's just about, you need to choose, right? You need to choose to change the story. And I'm like, but what is the process of changing that story so that it's allowed to have the life and death it needs to have to, I guess, be real? Or like, how much control do you think we have over changing essentially what is a loss?
It's so true. It's not easy. And anybody that's like, just change your mind, it's easy. It's not, because there's so many different factors, including the emotional component of it, including the attachment that we have, including how long we've been believing a story. So some of the stories that we carry inside us are from our ancestors, are from, long, long ago, and they've been passed on to us. And so this idea of just shifting them immediately, it takes time, it takes practice, it takes willingness, and it takes going towards discomfort. So what you said around the grieving process of being willing to feel what needs to die inside of me, or what am I letting go of? And there is a grieving process for, I think, all of us at this time at really different levels. And that's something that we get to navigate being human. I always remind people that we're all going to die, period. Everyone that you love at some point is going to die or is going to leave you. And I don't say this to be morose at all. It actually is a way that I guide my life so that I show up and am totally present in every moment, because I don't take it for granted. I don't take it for granted it's going to be the same the next day. But that comes from a lot of work, to a lot of releasing, a lot of getting comfortable with the fact that it's limited. And that constant mindfulness of looking at, what have I attached to? What do I need to release? How do I release it in a graceful way? How do I allow myself to have the process, like you said, of letting go, to make the space to bring the new in?
Well, how do we let go? How do we ask for grace or cultivate that to help this process out? Because like when you're feeling deep depression, or when I'm feeling like really down, it feels like there's a process and steps to come out of it. And my choice is a part of that. But when you're in a distorted state of thinking, and it can be deeply distorted, it starts to compound on itself, where it's hard to even believe the possibility is true, that there could be another reality, or that there's a way out.
Yeah, and the way to navigate that is that you have a practice in place before you hit the rough spots. So when you're in a difficult position, when you're in a big challenge or a depression or a funk, whatever it is, it's really difficult to gather tools at that point and go, oh, I'll try this new thing and see if this works. But what does work is if, when you're in a good space, you cultivate your presence, you cultivate that capacity to witness, and you gather tools around. And I can share some really specific tools.
Yeah.
But you gather the tools and you have them with you. You make them part of your daily life, so that when it does get challenging, they're right there.
Yeah.
It's still hard. It doesn't mean it makes it easy, but at least you have the tools and they're in your body. You somatically have brought them in so that you have access to them. So a couple of tools. One of my favorite ones is what most of us do whenever we have space in our lives, what I call a gap, is we tend to fill it with noise.
Mm-hmm.
So you're walking to the bathroom, you're waiting at a stoplight, you're getting a cup of coffee, whatever it is. There's all these mini spaces in our lives. And what most of us do is check our phone, or make a list of what we need to do, or worry about the things in the future, or beat ourselves up about things in the past. And there's all of this noise that's pretty constant. So the practice is simple practice, but profound changes can happen in our lives. That anytime there's a gap, that we become really mindful of saying, okay, I have this time between here and the bathroom. Where do I want to put my attention? And that you're choosing to grab your own attention and put it where you want to put it. And that might be towards a mantra, towards a song that you sing, towards saying nice things to yourself, towards stillness. but you're choosing where you want to put your attention. And the truth is, for most of us, this is incredibly difficult because we've trained ourselves to be very fragmented. We've trained ourselves to think, to be busy, to check the phone. And so learning how to stop and bring our attention to where we want it to be. And one of the things that I like to have people do is like set an intent. What do you want more of in your life? Pick one quality. And that might be peace, that might be more presence, that might be joy. And anytime there's a gap, the question is, how do I bring joy into this moment? How do I bring more presence into this moment? And as you ask that question of yourself, the wisdom of your being will turn on and help you to access that.
So if someone is like it's the issue is a cascade of negative thoughts, right? And that might be fueling whatever problem, the depression, whatever's happening.
Yes.
And it feels impossible to say like, I'm going to stop this or turn it off. And so I'm hearing you say it's almost like micro mantras in a way, or these are little mini ceremonies in a way of saying, well, if you break it down to like the next 5 minutes, or like from here to making my lunch today, I don't know if I can handle life after that, but maybe I can put on such and such song, and like it's sort of where you're marshaling your attention.
Yeah, exactly. And breaking it into little baby steps, because often when people are in challenges, they're like, I just need to feel better forever. And it's too much. Or I don't know how to not be angry if you have a lot of anger going on. Or so to be able to say, okay, for the next 3 minutes, let's take a different action that I would normally take.
Yeah, because I think with what's happening now, such intense change in our world and all of it unknown, no one can tell you where it's going to go. Lots of people can guess, and there's a lot of talking heads about it's going to go this way or that way. But that is really unsettling for people, because even if we really actually didn't have much control over it in the past, we certainly thought we did. We thought we could at least plan for, I'm sure you and I, we had plans of like, well, next fall, I'm going to do this event and this thing. And a lot of us had that sense of security and at least being able to decide about things in the future. And right now, it's hard to plan more than a month in advance, and without really being like, I can't say for sure that will work. Who knows where the world will be? That feels deeply unsettling. I've felt that. It's been really unsettling to constantly have to remind myself that, man, it's been proven to me that I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we're all getting a crash course in learning how to dance with the mystery. The truth is, we're always
we are.
dancing with
crash course is the right term. It feels like a crash, and I just keep wanting to know what are the ways we can bring more grace to a process that's like it's underway. I can't stop it or change it from happening. It's happening. Where does the grace come from? How do we bring that in?
A couple different ways. So the practice of moving our attention, but I also think prayer right now is really important. Connecting to our ancestors, creating altars, like creating physical ways for us to connect, because we are so separated from each other. Even though we have this blessing of being able to connect via the internet, it's limited.
Yeah.
And that loss of getting to touch people and hug and be close to people and meet strangers, all the things that we took for granted, there is a loss right now. And so
yes,
that combo of give yourself the space to have the grief, whatever grief that you have, and understand probably any grief that you have that's rising is connected to older grief. I've been working with a lot of people, and the metaphor that I use in my community is that all of us have this pan of oil in our being. That's all the unprocessed emotions and gunk and stories that we haven't known what to do with. And often when you're on a spiritual path, you pour water into the container of your being and the oil starts to rise. Or now I'm realizing, there's a huge shift. And what happened is there's a huge shift and suddenly everybody's oil's up. Like I've talked to so many people that are like, My self-esteem is in the toilet. I feel like I did when I was in high school. I'm remembering all of these things that I hadn't processed. So for a lot of us, the unprocessed stuff is now coming from the subconscious. It was always there. Usually we were doing other things, so we're able to push it down. But now it's coming up. And if we can recognize it's coming up into our conscious mind, and what we don't want to do is go, oh God, I got to push this back down again. What we want to do is go, okay, opportunity. This feels awful. This is uncomfortable. It's scary. I don't know what to do. But if you hold and say, okay, what's arising here? What's the content? And realize you're part of a lot of humans right now that have the opportunity to clean, to let the content come up on its way out.
How do we clean it? I mean, I'm hearing you say it's something about ritual in a way.
Ritual's really powerful because we have a tendency to want to go into our head and think about it and figure it out.
Right. Talk it out. Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes talking it out works, but a lot of times it just makes us more confused or then judge ourselves more or feel victimized or judge somebody else. And so why I love ritual so much is it acts as a part of us that's not our mind, it's our soul, it's our being. And ritual is very simple. Ritual is an action that you take to mark a transition. Mm-hmm. And here we are in a huge transition on multiple layers. And so, ceremony is about honoring what's happening and helping us to integrate it on a body level rather than just mentally. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what so many of us are struggling with right now is we're trying to make sense of something that's not sensical.
And something that's very much in process. So it's even hard to know really no one can say like, hey, this is what's happening. I mean, obviously on the surface we can say that, but I'm sure you can sense that there are these larger shifts that I don't know what they are. No one does, but I can feel them. Yeah. And I feel it mirrored in myself. I see it like in this macro level in the world, and I see it as above, so below. So in your book, The Warrior Heart Practice, we have these chambers: intent, feeling, story, truth. I don't know if that's not necessarily the particular order, but I feel like you do have an order in the process and then working backwards, right?
Yeah, there's a very specific order, and the process is designed to help us separate out and create more space so that we can clean out the emotions, the story, get clear about what the truth is and what our intent is, and then come back around again. What happens with many of us is that the story and the emotion gets tied together. And the story then also gets tied with other stories in the past.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe even other people's stories.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Well, maybe, does it feel good for us to go through these 4 quadrants a little bit, these 4 different demarcations of this process? Because it's sort of a ritual in itself, the practice.
It is. And it's basically when you're feeling out of sorts, confused, triggered, upset, you go into the process or the practice. And I think about it this way, is that each of us, our heart has 4 chambers, and each of the chambers are really important. So you don't say, I like my left ventricle chamber the best.
Don't need it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's the same thing with the chambers. So where we start with the practice is in the feeling chamber. So the first chamber is the feeling chamber. And the question is, what am I feeling? Separate from the story. And most of us haven't learned how to do this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that can be probably slippery slope, dancing between the two.
Yeah, exactly. So we're learning to separate out the first chamber, which is the feeling chamber, and the second chamber, which is the story chamber. So what you can say to your mind is, hey, mind, we're going to get to you. I promise we'll talk. But now I just want to feel the emotional content, what's going on in my body. And learning how to be in relationship with your feelings is uncomfortable because many of us have either repressed our feeling or we cycle our feelings, our emotions, because we've got a story. We tell ourselves a story. It makes the emotion happen. then we tell more of a story, and then there's more emotion. And so learning to come back into this present moment and ask ourselves, what am I feeling right now in this moment? And where is it in my body? So you're learning how to track the exact emotions that you're having, where they're happening physically.
And do you find that there's like layers of that feeling? Like, are we trying to find the kernel of it in a sense, or just sort of all of it? Let's just, sort of, is it an exorcism of sorts of like it all needs to be recognized
Brought
to
out.
be cathartic?
Yeah, it all needs to be named and brought forward. And I found it really helpful for people to download a chart that lists different emotions or has the emojis of different emotions, because usually we're really stunted in our relationship with our emotional body. So to learn the vocabulary of the difference between, oh, I feel disdain versus I feel frustrated, for example.
Yeah. Do you feel like people can do some of this, or particularly that step? Let's just stick with this one for now, of the feeling on their own, or does it take a little guidance to dig and be like, hey, maybe you're like, look around that corner a bit more, and there's more to it?
Yeah, I found both. So I know a lot of people that I've taught the practice to and not guided them through, just shared the practice, have been able to go and really sit with themselves and realize, oh, wow, I didn't realize I had so much anger inside of me. And just having the permission to feel their feelings without having to explain, justify, or understand is huge. And this is what's beautiful about the feeling chamber is you're not going in to go, why am I feeling this way? Or whose fault is it? It's just feel it, period. That's all.
Yes, it seems too like right now there's hidden feelings, because it seems obvious to be like, I'm stressed out, I'm anxious. And we're like, yep, that's pretty straightforward. But then like, I'm angry, right? I think for some people, it's like, well, why would I be angry? I don't get it. So maybe I'm not angry. But then you start to really sit with it and feel the anger. And it's like, well, that's there. Okay, there is anger as a part of this. Maybe that explains some. Well, I'm getting to the story or the intent here, but do you find that to be too? Like you have to be a little bit of a detective to allow the emergence of what is there.
Absolutely, and that's the beauty of not needing to understand it or intellectualize it, where you can just be curious and just be like, hi there, how are you? I'm here, I'm listening. And then you go in. It's like spelunking in a way. You go down to see what's the content that you have, not what you wish the content of your emotional being was or what you think it should be, but what's actually happening. And that in itself is healing. It's so profoundly healing to just be with your emotions. And I always remind people, like, if you were sitting with someone who was ill or even who was dying, the quality you would bring to that person. You would bring incredible patience, you'd bring your presence, you'd bring your heart, you'd bring your compassion. And we can all feel those qualities. And it's those exact qualities you want to bring to your emotional body.
And is there a time process for this, or is it flexible?
It's flexible. It's really what's needed. So for some people, they can go in and within 4 or 5 minutes, they're clear. They've traced it, they know where it is in their body. Yeah. For some people, it might take a little bit longer. And there may be also a courting of the emotional body. So if you've numbed out your emotions or repressed them or diverted them, sometimes, like, for example, sometimes people are trained in particular families, you're not allowed to be sad, but you can be angry. And other people are trained, you're not allowed to be angry, but you can be sad. And so all the emotion gets channeled one way. And so sometimes it takes a while to realize, oh, I'm actually not sad, I'm pissed. Or I'm actually not angry, I'm in deep grief.
Or both.
Or both, yeah.
Right now, it feels like a lot of things.
Yeah, exactly. And that's that gentle sitting with ourselves of like, oh, I'm feeling frustrated and angry and scared and overwhelmed. Just breathe. Just be with all of it, the complexity.
Okay, so once we have been in the feeling chamber and we have a sense of those feelings, where we're shifting into story, right?
Yes.
And what do we do in this space? Because you were saying originally feeling is about somatic, the body, feeling without a kind of judgment. It's just to witness. Mm-hmm. We move into story. I heard you say it had something to do with the mind.
Yeah, now you're asking yourself, what am I actually thinking? What's the story that I'm telling myself? And what you want to be aware of is not going into the story chamber and trying to make a better story or trying to just get into the mess of it. I think about the story chamber, you want to be an archaeologist and you want to actually start looking at the layers of the story that you're telling yourself, of what you're thinking. So how are you judging yourself? How are you judging others? Do you have a story that's connected to a past story?
This sounds tricky. Like, could we use, do you have an example we could use, perhaps, a hypothetical or non-hypothetical that's anonymous?
Yeah, I have a great story.
Any hypothetical example is probably true for someone or many people.
Yeah. And I'll use a story from my own life because I have a super complicated story that I unraveled in 15 minutes. And so it's a good one to share.
There we go.
Yeah. So just the background for this particular unravel that I did was that I'd been friends with a man for a very, very long time. And at a certain point, we decided that we were going to get to know each other to see if we would start dating. And it was a revelation in a way because it was the first time I was like, let's actually get to know each other before we date. And about 2 years in of us being very close and spending a lot of time together, I decided I'm in 100%. And he decided I'm out. And we both were at a workshop that I was teaching that he happened to be participating in. And he fell in love with somebody else in the workshop.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, this is in your book.
One.
Yeah.
And so I had a moment where I'm shortening the story. You can read it in the book. Mm-hmm. I had a moment where I felt really, really heartbroken. And I just stopped and I just immediately was like, go to your room, go to the chambers, sit. So the overriding feeling was feeling, I can't remember the word, disappointed. Deeply, deeply disappointed. And as I just sat with the disappointment, I was like, this is old. This isn't just this moment. I could feel like this is something I've had for a long time. So when I went into the story chamber, the story that was there, and we have to be willing to just see what's there, was I shouldn't be dating. I'm too old to be dating. I'm just making a fool of myself. I'm never going to find somebody that I connect with. They're always going to leave for other people. They're always going to pick younger women. Like all of this noise around the relationship and relationships in general. And I just sat with it. And this is the thing with the story chamber is there may be a lot of different stories. And then it connected to my ex-husband and all my stories around the end of the relationship and what I did wrong, like all that.
Deep, yeah.
Yeah. And again, we're learning how to witness a story, but also excavate what else is it connected to and be in that place of curiosity. So I now have the feeling, disappointment, and this massive story that I didn't even know was in me still. And the next chamber is the truth chamber. And so once you have a sense of what the story is that you're telling yourself, and there's no right or wrong way to have a story, and it's going to be messy probably, then you step out of the story and you have to be willing to say, all right, what's actually true here? And what most of us do is we usually drag a better story into the truth chamber and call it the truth.
That's justice.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
But we want to keep going, teaching ourselves how to go towards what is actually true, what's true in this moment. And there's a couple ways I found to be able to see what's true. One, it's really simple. The truth is always one sentence, super simple. And the second is your body knows what the truth is. You'll have even if you don't like the truth, and I'll share, my example, I did not like the truth, but it was true, was this resonance in the body when you hit a truth. So what we want to be aware of is sometimes we'll tell a truth and then we'll have a story about the truth and we're back into the story chamber. So what the truth was, I got really quiet again. I just opened my heart and I was like, what's true? What's actually true? And the first truth that bubbled up for my being was he gets to choose. Period.
Yeah, that's cold but true.
Cold but
I mean,
true.
it's true. It's more actually just true. Like
Yeah.
it's not cold or warm.
Right.
It's just that's true.
But what most of us do with that is go back into story. He gets to choose because I'm not good enough, or because she's more pretty, or because blah, blah, blah.
Whatever.
That's
yeah.
all story. The truth is he gets to choose who he loves, period. So I could feel that was the first half. There was another half.
Yeah, well, what comes up for me is this idea too about like Byron Katie's work of saying also like, is it really true? Like if you're trying to get to the truth, it's saying like sometimes you can get to things that are like, well, no, that's not really. If I'm really honest with myself, that's not true. You know, what is the truth here?
What is the truth here? Yeah, and Byron Katie's work is so powerful, and this is the same. It's an inquiry practice to help us separate and get clear on what's ours, what's true, where we want to go next. The second truth that dropped in as I waited, because I could feel, I'm like, there's another truth here, was I get to choose. I get to choose what I do next. I was in a very difficult situation, and I got to choose what I did next. So that felt good in my body. I was like, all right. I didn't know how. And this is where the intent comes in. So the fourth chamber is the intent chamber, and that's your focus, where you want to put your attention around the situation. And I always tell people, your intent is one word that's a quality that you want to embody. So again, it's beautiful to wait to let the intent bubble up, to see what your being wants. And the intent isn't, I want them to be different, I want this not to be happening. Your intent has to be about what you're going to do, what your action or choice is going to be, the feeling sense of it. So my intent at the time was unconditional love. Your intent might be compassion for yourself. Your intent might be to make a boundary. Your intent might be presence. It can be anything, but it's something you can feel. So, and then you go back through. That's where the magic happens.
But didn't you say typically they go in reverse direction to sort of re-check in a way?
Yeah. So what you do is once you have your truth and your intent, so you have your intent and then you go back to the truth chamber. So you're going to cycle back around. And I like to think about now you have these two allies, your truth and your intent, that are with you. And you may see another truth as you go back into the truth chamber, or you might not. But now you have a new perspective. And then you step back into the story chamber.
Well, when you went through that process and you said you were doing it alone, you must have felt quite emotionally charged though still? Or did you feel like it was, because when you get to that part of the truth, it's true. And maybe there's a release there, but it also feels kind of like could be gasoline on a certain emotional fire in a way. I mean, are there ways to navigate that, or is it important to work through that and continue with the process?
It's important to continue through and work with the process. And I think where people can get challenged, I've had a lot of practice with this, of separating out and talking to people, where the challenge is people will go into the truth and then pull the story in and not realize they're pulling the story. And so to keep the story out takes practice, honestly.
Right.
Yeah, it just takes practice of starting to separate out. This is truth, this is story. And that's a practice I invite people to do in their lives all the time, to start just really looking at what's the difference between the story and the truth. And I think that's something each of us gets to answer for ourselves, and it takes time to sort.
What about when like you're going through this process and you're uncovering trauma or like sort of causes, so it's not something happens, something acute in the moment, and then you're going through the process and actually your emotional charge to it is related to other things that are unrelated to that, perhaps a traumatic event. What then? What
I have people do then is, if you're not triggered into the trauma, if you're having the emotion, to do one at a time. So I would take note of like, oh God, this is actually about my brother beating me up when I was a kid. So you would take note of that and either make the decision, I'm going to focus on that through the chambers, or continue with what you were doing, knowing that you're coming back for that one.
So separate them out in a
Separate them
sense.
out. Separate them out. Absolutely. They're separate things. And it gives you then like, oh, okay, this is one thread and this is another thread. So they're not tied together any longer. It's much easier to undo it then, to take it through the chambers. If you get triggered into a trauma response, what you want to do is go to the truth chamber, is get yourself back in your physical body in this moment. So you don't want to re-traumatize yourself by going towards the story or trying to explore the feelings any longer. If you're really lit up in trauma, what's true? And that means I'm safe. I'm in my house. My feet are on the ground. So you're using your somatic experience to get back into the present moment. And then you can make a decision. I need more support on this, or I need to release some of this trauma by movement. You know, so often trauma gets released by movement before you go back through the process.
And is there like, is this something is better like spoken or written down or both? Is there a particular ritual that you recommend to any of this?
It depends on what works for you. So for some people, the writing is cathartic. For some people, thinking it or speaking it out loud with somebody else, or even just speaking it out loud, is what helps to create the shift. I had a woman who once made a board out of felt, and she created the quadrants, the 4 chambers, and she had a little piece that was her, and she would walk herself through and talk herself through it. And that was beautiful.
It's a board game.
A board game, exactly. So you can be creative. And drawing, doing art, what are you feeling? Draw it out. What's the story? What does it look like? That can take you deeper into yourself as well.
I'd love it if we had one of those wheels you could spin that had emotions, and then it comes on like disdain, like you said, like, well, am I feeling disdain? No. Spin it again.
I love that. Yeah.
You know, let it just keep presenting you that it's sort of like a Ouija board of sorts, but
yeah, exactly. That would be
a way to perhaps bring divinity into the process. That'd be interesting. Have you ever brought in things like cards or ways of something of divinity speaking through the process beyond just through the mechanism of our body, feelings, and thoughts?
I haven't, but I absolutely love that idea. I think that would be incredibly helpful as well.
It's another layer.
Another touch point.
Right,
yeah, it's another touch point. We've done it with groups of people where there'll be one person walking through and a guide bringing them through and acting it out. I mean, we've done all sorts of things, which is really powerful. So, yeah.
Does it work for groups?
It actually does. I've actually done some pandemic podcast visualizations around taking groups of people through how do you feel, what's the story, what's your truth, what's the intent, and coming back around again.
I mean, if you had to act as the collective of humanity, is there a way that your heart tells you like how you could walk through this process for like all of us? Like just like it's sort of what you're feeling is like if I'm trying to be bigger than my own individuality.
Yeah, absolutely. We can totally play with that because there are certain truths about this time that are universal and that apply to all of us. So yeah, we can definitely do that. It would be really powerful. And I want to let me finish up just what my experience was of like to close the loop around that, and then we'll open up to the collective. I love that. So just so people see how the process works. So I went back. My intent, unconditional love. When you name what your intent is, you don't need to know how you're going to do it. Like I had no idea how I was going to go back into teaching in front of these 2 humans for the next 4 or 5 days. Like I had no idea, but I knew what I wanted for myself, that I wanted to be able to bring unconditional love. And then the truth, I get to choose, he gets to choose. And then I went back into the story chamber. When you go back into the story chamber, it's the same thing of you wait to see how to be in a different relationship with your story. Sometimes it's rewriting your story. Sometimes it's realizing you have other work to do. Sometimes it's just your perspective shifts and you realize the story was never true. My experience was when I went back into the story chamber was that I had this aha moment, this huge that changed everything. And the aha moment was so great, was this realization, I'm getting a PhD in letting go. This is a PhD. and I'm going to rock. I'm going to do this. I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I'm in, because I felt the universe was saying, all right, sweetie, you didn't do this so well with your ex-husband because it was a very complicated, messy situation. Let's try it again, sweetheart. And I felt this I was loved. I wasn't being punished. And I realized that was my old story, was I was being punished for something, a deeper story. And the new story, the new revelation I had was, I am so loved. I'm being challenged to be more unconditionally loving in this hard situation. And when I went back to the feeling chamber, because you always close in the feeling chamber, I felt disappointed. That was still in my body, but I had a way to hold it now. And, sometimes you'll go back into the feeling chamber and there'll be relief, there'll be this sense of joy. And sometimes you find there's grief, or you find, oh, there's still things to clean up. So I just hung out with the disappointment for the next couple of days. It eventually moved. And it didn't mean the situation went away.
Yeah, that sounds like a tough situation. I mean, talk about triggers constantly. And then having to be in this dual role at the same time. I mean, that's tough.
It was tough. Yeah. And I went back into it of like, all right, I can do this. I don't know how, but I'm leaning into myself, my wisdom. I'm leaning into spirit. And we all got through. So it was messy at times, but.
Well, thanks for sharing that. It's nice to have an example and one that's personal as well, and one that's pretty intense. Well, I would love it if we could go into the final chapter of this conversation by exploring, sort of now zoom out from the individual to the collective, and take a little playfulness to see how what we're picking up on in a larger process and how that fits into the warrior heart practice.
Beautiful. I love this. So I'll invite everyone that's listening to put one hand on your heart and one hand on your belly, just to ground you in relationship to your physical body. You can keep your hand on your heart and your hand on belly as long as it feels good. And let's just start with, what are we all feeling right now? You can feel what you're feeling individually, and also open up to the collective. There's feelings of confusion, of fear, of feeling out of control, of dread, of great suffering. So let yourself just be with your emotional content, but also opening up to what we're collectively navigating right now. No story, just gently, compassionately be with the content of your emotions and of the collective. Breathing into any place that you're noticing where those emotions are in your body, breathe into those areas. So you may feel it in your belly, you may feel it in your shoulders. Again, you're not trying to change or understand or explain. You're just being with, gently breathing in. Good. And taking note of those feelings. And now stepping into the story chamber. So together we're going to step into the story chamber. What are the stories that are lit up right now for us as humans in relationship to the pandemic? So the stories of disaster mind, this is never going to end. It's going to be the economic downfall of civilization, of my own personal world. I'm never going to be able to hug a person again. I'm out of control, just like I was when my father left. So just see if there's other layers, the story that you're telling yourself, the story of the collective might be spinning around as well. A lot of fear, a lot of confusion, but what's the story around that? A lot of conspiracy theories, a lot of conflicting news at this time. And then what other story has also gotten evoked inside of you. So be curious, be like that archaeologist that digs and looks at another layer. Be really curious as you explore the story, what you're telling yourself, what's in the collective right now with all the reports and experiences. And again, there's nothing you need to do, but just notice, witness. Good. And thanking the story, thanking all those different stories, and imagining now that you're going to step into the truth chamber. You might visualize that chamber as very clear and bright and light. I often think about the story chamber as really messy. So stepping into this truth chamber, opening, asking your being, not your mind, your being, what is actually true? What is true here? And I'll just name a couple truths. This is a very powerful virus. Period. There's been pandemics before us. There will be pandemics after us. Period. We don't know what's going to happen next. Period. So just breathe into, do your best to not go back into story, to put the period in and just feel. And is there any other truth for you personally at this time? What else is true for you? Or what else do you see as true for the collective? And if you're having a hard time finding a truth, you can stay with this one. I am breathing. Good. And now moving to the fourth chamber, the chamber of intent. What do you want? What's your focus? One word that's a quality that you want to bring your attention towards. This is going to be your North Star. What's your intent? And let it bubble up from your being. One word that's a quality that you want to learn how to embody, that you're willing to bring back into your life. And you can also open to feel what's our collective intent. So do your personal intent, and then if you have spaciousness to open to what's the collective intent right now. And bringing that word into a feeling sense. And then stepping back into the truth chamber, bringing your intent. You imagine that you're going to hold hands with your intent, with that quality, that word, either your individual intent or the collective intent you witnessed, and then holding the truth in your other hand. So feel like you have your intent on one side, you have your truth on the other, you have these two allies. And that you can then step back into the story chamber. And look around and see, can you perceive the story in a new way? What is yours to unravel? What was never yours to unravel? how can you be the hero or the heroine of your story? Or how can you dismantle it? Again, opening to your own wisdom, how to be in relationship with the story. And then stepping finally back into the feeling chamber and checking in. How do you feel now? There's no right or wrong. How do you feel now? Taking a breath into your full being. Good. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes and be present here.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
It's good to have an embodied experience for ourselves after speaking about it too. And I'm sure there's many other avenues and nuances as are listed in the book as well. What's the best way for people to find the work, to find you and interact these days?
My website, HeatherAshAmara.com. There's a ton of resources there. And then I'm on all the social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram places, Heather Ash Amara. And the book is available pretty much anywhere books are sold.
Wonderful. Well, this feels like a good place to close. Thank you so much for giving us your time and for your work and for continuing to lead with the heart. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It's such a joy to be able to be here and share a little bit of the teachings with you. Gratitude.
Thanks, Heather, for coming on the show and for giving us your time and for sharing your insights and your work. Check out her work. I think you'll enjoy it. I think you'll find it valuable. So this music you're hearing in the background, see, I already found a way to share with you some of the strings process. This is one of my test mixes of a track that is tentatively titled Undying. And I worked on the arrangement with Lorna Doone. And it's a trio, the Boise Philharmonic. There's 3 players, cello, viola, and violin, but we had 3 different parts. So there's really 9 parts. So it's like a mini orchestra. And this is a taste of some of the new work. This one's quite contemporary classical. Others get a bit more into the orchestral pop direction or ambient direction. But here you go, sneak peek. I won't play all of it, but this is what you can hear for now. Hey, thanks for listening. Thanks for giving the podcast a review. And if you really like it, it means a lot to share it. Share it with people out there on social media, with your friends, like a particular episode you like, or anything like that. It means a lot. Tag East Forest or at East Forest Music on Facebook. And you guys keep doing your thing. Keep walking your walk. Don't take any shit. But if you do, do it with grace.